you want to ask yourself in sharing the bits and pieces of your life, can the story exist without it? Greetings, Apreneurs. Welcome to the Authorpreneur Secrets podcast, the show that uncovers the secrets to win with books beyond book sales and dominate authorpreneurship. Through exclusive author interviews, stories, and must-have resources, you will discover some of the secrets and strategies to thrive with books and generate lasting income. I invite you to become an Authorpreneur ambassador and join me in my mission to raise up 10,000 Caribbean authorpreneurs by 2030. Spread the word about the podcast and encourage more people to increase their impact and income with books beyond book sales. To get started, visit authorpreneursecrets.com/resources and download all the resources that you need to become a winning authorpreneur. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Apreneurs is episode 107 of the Authorpreneur Secrets podcast. I'm your host, C. Ruth Taylor, and on today's show, I want to give you some tips on writing memoirs based on the lessons I learned from writing my first memoir and republishing it 4 years after the first release. I'm also going to be giving you a little recap of the launch of Unshackled Queens. One of the aims that we have, especially in my publishing services company, Bamboo Spark, is that we want to encourage more people to share their stories, especially Caribbean people. We want our stories to be told to showcase the greatness of our people, our expertise, to preserve our cultural heritage, and to pass on our culture from one generation to the next. The reality is that some of the stories that you are going to share, especially when it comes to memoirs, I find that it can be painful, and there's a lot of trepidation that can come when you think about sharing your story, because your story is not just your story. Your story impacts others and it involves others, and you're giving your side of the story, and there can be some serious implications where that is concerned. It can affect relationships, and sometimes persons can be worried about libel and all of those things. So I am going to just share some tips with you and give you a recap of the launch of Unshackled Queens. I'm going to be playing just a little portion of the live episode where Kenisha Flemings, my co-host, shared a little bit on shame and why it's important for us to deal with this emotion. So I want you to stay tuned.
Your book is the perfect spark to get the fire going in your personal life, career, business, or ministry. Light that book spark today with Bamboo Sparks, a global independent publishing services and publishing education and training business for transformation. Bamboo Sparks will take you from manuscript to market faster than you thought possible and even manage the process for you. Check out their 3 main offerings: the Self-Publishing Spark, the Rocket Writing Spark, and their Bamboo Sparks done-for-you management deals for authors in the Caribbean and the diaspora. Discover how Bamboo Sparks can help you to publish and leverage your book to grow 90 feet tall at bamboosparks.com, and that's bamboo with a U.
Bamboo Sparks is a global publishing services company, and we specialize in managing the publication process for independent authors, and we help with the digital marketing process as well. And so if you feel overwhelmed by the publishing process and you don't think you have time to do it, maybe it's your first time, maybe you are a retiree and you don't understand the technology and you just don't have the time or the bandwidth to take on the publication process, you can allow Bamboo Sparks to publish on your behalf. We work with you and manage the publication process. You maintain 100% control, and we just come alongside you to provide the publishing services that you need, and you keep all your rights. All right, so let's get into my latest entrepreneurship venture. And if you've been following, the past episodes were leading up to the launch of Unshackled Queens, which is a community, an empowerment community for women to get past their pains and anything that would seek to shackle them so that they can walk in their greatness and fulfill their purpose with confidence and with freedom. You know, it's about unshackling. And it is out of that experience as well that I am going to be sharing the tips, because Unshackled Queen is a republication of the book Heartache Queen Unshackled, which was my first book. So it was basically a live broadcast to celebrate my birthday. We had some technical difficulties because the internet on the island was acting up. My internet provider was acting up, but we managed to get an hour and a half in, and my co-host during the time that I was off screen was able to pick up and flow really nicely. And I want to thank Kenisha Flemings for being such a wonderful co-host and for enlightening us on shame and having the courage to share her story. If you want to hear more about her story, I want to encourage you to go to the YouTube channel Unshackled Queens, and the link will be in the show notes. Kenisha has over 20 years of experience as an educator. She's also a trained guidance counselor. She has her own mentoring program, and she is just an inspiration. So that broadcast was an example of how you can repurpose your book. You can use it to launch a community, start a movement, or as it is in this case, to give birth to a YouTube channel. And so I just want to play a little clip, then I'll come back and talk about the tips that I learned from writing my memoir and having to republish it. So stay tuned. What is shame, and why is shame so dangerous?
Welcome to the launch of Unshackled Queens.
Dr. Brené Brown goes on to say that we all experience shame, right? It's not a women thing, it's not a man thing, it's not a children thing. We all experience shame. That's one. The second thing is we all are afraid to talk about it.
Oh!
Right? We are all afraid to talk about it. And then the third thing is the less we talk about it, the more we have it.
And so, again, it's using your book for greater impact. All right, so let's get into the segment I know you will want, which has to do with tips in writing and publishing your memoirs. The first tip I want to give is one, you need to understand why you are writing. So you need to have a solid why. Because sometimes along the way, you kind of lose sight of that, and you might feel frustrated. And when you're sharing your story, especially if it is a painful story or it has episodes that others might feel embarrassed about, or it has the potential to cause a strain on other relationships, you really have to tap into your why. Why are you writing? And the second thing I would encourage you to do is for the persons that are most affected, especially if it is family husband, mother, or those close to you, is to notify them that you are writing so that it doesn't just come as a surprise. I guess it also depends on the relationship that you have with them. In my case, what I did when I was first writing my book, before I even put pen to paper, when I got the idea to turn my pain into something glorious and to do that through writing and sharing my story, my mother was a significant part of that journey. And so I contacted her because I was worried, putting yourself out there, people criticizing, and what if she got upset about me sharing some of my childhood experiences, especially the negative ones? Would she be upset? And so she said to me, if your story will help somebody, then it is worth it. And she was already sharing my story in the hospital and helping others. And so I got the go ahead. But it still had a little impact when it came out because there were persons who perhaps felt I shouldn't have included certain things. And the depth of my sharing also caused her some pain. And so for me, I was ashamed of my first book, my memoir, because I felt it was TMI, that I shared too much. And though I use pseudonyms for some places and some names, I kept my identity and hers. And I said if I had to do it over again, I would have done it differently. So one of the things you can do, apart from having the why and notifying the key persons involved, is to use pseudonyms. And sometimes you can write the story in the third person as if it is somebody else's story, even though it's your story. So that's another way of doing it. So when I republished the book 4 years later, I did not use my name. I actually wrote the story. I said that the story is true, although the characters, the names have been changed to maintain privacy or prevent embarrassment. So I know of persons who it is their story, but you wouldn't know because they wrote it in the third person to protect the parties. You want to, as I said before, in tip number 2, notify the persons. I remember working on a project with a particular client, and she shared a story about her son, which was powerful, and it was a good example to make a point. But when she showed her son what she had written, her son was most upset. He didn't want his story in the book, and so she had to take it out. And it becomes this issue, which would be tip number 4, if my math is correct. You want to ask yourself, in sharing the bits and pieces of your life, can the story exist without it? If it can exist without it, leave it out. If pseudonym is not there, or you feel the story can exist without it, leave it out. If the story cannot exist without it, though painful, yet true, put it out, but still do it with grace. You don't want to be doing therapy on paper. And part of mine, to be honest, was therapy. So writing is therapeutic. The first writing is really for you, but publishing is for the reader. So you have to, which would be tip number 5, you have to focus on what is the message? What is the reader going to get out of this? What is the message that I'm trying to convey? So that is not just a journaling of your life from childhood to adulthood or a particular issue in your life. You are sharing because you want to help the reader. You want to help to serve or solve a problem. You want to give hope and inspiration with your story, but you must understand what is that hope and inspiration. And for me, it was the whole point that your life can be transformed, that in spite of the difficulties you've gone through, God can make something beautiful of your life, and that you don't, as Kenisha would say, you don't have to stay stuck because of negative things that have happened to you. And I wanted to console other persons who had suffered from heartbreak and also to share tips for their own healing. And so I shaped the book around that goal. So what is the goal? What is the purpose of you sharing? Is it that you're just journaling? You know, so you have to organize the data properly. And as I said, in the first book, I thought I shared too much TMI. So I rewrote it and kept the truth in it, but took out some of the things to suit the purpose that I wanted, because I felt, even though in writing the first version, I tried to be as careful as possible and I kept what I thought was okay, when I look back at it, it still felt like TMI and I could have left out certain episodes. So in republishing it, I kept the cover and I changed the size. Once you change the size, it's going to require a new ISBN. And I also changed the subtitle. The first subtitle was My Journey Towards Liberation, Self-Acceptance and Wholeness. The second subtitle is From Heartbreak to Wholeness. And I added new content. So it was republished, revised, and so new ISBN, but I kept the cover for continuity. I liked the first cover, but I used strictly pseudonyms throughout it. So as I said, I just wanted to share those tips with you in terms of memoirs. You can also share your memoirs in terms of a theme. What is the theme, you know, you're focusing on? Which episodes of your life would best suit it? So the memoir is not your entire autobiography, but it's periods of your life or certain episodes that you want to give focus on. And in sharing your story, the truth is you're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to feel nervous. I remember when I was doing it the first time, I told my publisher to pause, to stop. And it took me 9 months after writing for the publication to come out because I was so afraid. I started second guessing myself and struggling with author self-doubt and guilt, and a bit of shame was involved. And so I had to go back to my why. That's why I started off saying the biggest tip is the why. And I wasn't just writing for me. I was writing so that lives could be changed and healed through my story. And we really get healing by sharing our stories. That's a part of it. When we are silent, that doesn't help. So if you're thinking of writing a memoir, remember it's not just your story. And if at all possible, you could send the parts that pertain to other persons in it for them to look at. You don't necessarily need their permission, but they should be made aware. And if what you're going to include is going to adversely affect certain relationships, you may want to take it out. And you have to ask yourself, can I share the story without certain details? So don't just dump everything there. Write with a sense of purpose and message. And if you've already written the story and it is out there, if you feel you need to rewrite it and republish it, you can go ahead and do that like I have done. So those are my tips in terms of the lessons learned from writing and republishing my memoir. I trust that you found this episode useful and helpful. So share it with a friend. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers for Authorpreneur Secrets. And if you want to be a part of the Unshackled Queens community, you can subscribe as well for weekly teachings, stories, and inspiration to empower women to get past the pain and to reign. So this is Ruth Taylor saying, thanks for tuning in. Ta for now, until next time.